Thank you. Good evening. Welcome to the regular monthly meeting for September 1st for the Lynbrook Board of Education. This evening, we will start with the salute to the flag, which is usually led by Mr. Yaker, but he is serving as color guard tonight, so Mr. Murray will lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, all present. May I have a motion to accept the minutes of August 11th, 2021 regular meeting? Mr. Yaker, second. Mrs. Danino, all in favor? Okay, moving on to reports from trustees. We held a ribbon cutting ceremony this evening for the new addition tonight. There will also be a ceremony on October 13th to name the new addition in memory of Alice Marie Bresnahan, a long-serving member of the Board of Education. In addition to the being able to have that ribbon cutting tonight, it's pretty exciting to see what this process has ended up with. It's a beautiful addition to the school. Great opportunities for our students, some really upgraded technology for us. So I think the kids will be very excited to take advantage. And also for our staff, it's also an excellent environment for our staff to be working on. So any thoughts on the report from trustees on this issue? Moving on to building inspections. The building inspections have begun. The Kindergarten Center and Atlantic Avenue and Waverly Park building inspections were conducted on August 30th. Mr. Yaker and Mr. Pileski, any insight on that?
Yes, we did the Waverly first, Mr. Pileski and I, along with Dr. Lynch and Jim Seda, and the custodians there, the head custodian Pete, and Pat Cousins. Those guys did an unbelievable job. The school was impeccable. The floors were spit shine clean. The rooms were decorated already. There obviously had been teachers in there setting up, so really just a very, very impressive job of keeping the grounds and everything just, I mean, really ready, probably ready to open already. Really looked great. And then we did the Kindergarten Center, then Atlantic Avenue, the administration building with the head custodian Lou over there. Also, for a very old building, just did an unbelievable job. And same thing, teachers obviously had seemed like they had been there setting up, and floors just looked unbelievable, very clean, and ready to go for school. So kids should be having, at least going into really clean buildings. So thanks to those guys.
Thank you, Mr. Yaker. West End and North Middle School were handled by Mrs. Hanson. Mrs. Hanson, any comments?
Yes, Mr. Lynch and myself toured West End and North this afternoon, in fact, with PTA presidents and head custodians and principals, and those buildings are looking fantastic. Particularly with West End, it is amazing the condition of that building, given its age. And North honestly looks in as good a shape as I've ever seen it. They had a punch list that probably I could count on my fingers on one hand the number of items, and for a building that size, that's pretty good. So I think both those buildings are as Mr. Yaker said, ready for students for sure.
Thank you, Mrs. Hanson. The Policy Committee recently met to review several policies. The first readings are tonight. Copies are available in the back of the room or online under virtual meetings. Mr. Yaker, or do you have some insight on those policies, please?
All right, so tonight the Policy Committee met. It was myself, Ms. Hanson, Dr. Burek, and Mr. Murray. So we did a first reading tonight on a whole bunch of policies. Policy 1530, smoking and other tobacco use on school premises. We included, so we updated that. We included all cannabis and cannabis products on that. 5300 and 5305, the Code of Conduct and Code of Conduct definitions. 5301, COVID protocols. So we updated that to include all the new and updated protocols as they came out. 5420R, Student Health Services Regulation. 5460, Child Abuse, Maltreatment, or Neglect 5460R, the regulation of that, 6410, authorized signatures, 8505, charging school meals, prohibition against shaming, 8635, the information security breach and notification. The exhibit on that is new. The parents will be getting updated that at open house, which will be coming up, and 8635E, which is the Parent Bill of Rights for Student Data and Security. We'll have a second reading on that and adoption hopefully at the October meeting. I think that's really the goal, so we'll have a second reading on those at the October meeting. Anybody else have anything to add?
Yeah, I'll just add that was my first experience with the policy committee, and most of those updates were made based on changes to state regulations or state guidance, so just making sure that our policies are in line with the current best legal advice.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. Anything else on any topic any of the board members would like to share? I will mention I was lucky enough to have an annual conversation with our new teachers and our new kindergarten parents. Parents were all there, very excited to have their kids back in school, appreciate the fact that they'd be back in school, recognizing that the only change was the fact that they wear the masks. They all handled that news very well, as did their students, as it was reported back on the first day. And our new staff was very excited to be here, so it should be a very enthusiastic year. Everybody involved seems very motivated and looking forward to it. Under old business, we have nothing under old business. Under new business, property sales. 2 pieces of property available, one right next door, next to the firehouse. And as I say, they're not making any more real estate. And then also across the street is this medical building that is also up for sale. So one of the things for us to think about is, would it be a wise investment? And what opportunities would it create for us? So any thoughts on that? I mean, I do think the one across the street, Mr. Yeager, would make for a wonderful pickleball stadium, but Dr. Lynch is going to address that in other areas. I remember years ago we had, Dr. Bear, who was on the board back then? Ellen, maybe so. Charlie Brown's became available at one point, which
That
was
was a
down
long
by
time ago.
a long time ago. There was an
The
idea
old
of
tofu?
getting that property. I mean, one of the opportunities are if we do take property like that, if we moved our administrators out of that building into their own building, that frees up a great deal of academic space for us over there. So
What exactly is this property over here? Is it a house? Is it a lot? Is it a?
yeah, Dr. Litch, what was the last, have you been communicating with the village about that, or Dr.?
Mr. Sater.
Mr. Sater has
Right.
been, so
Now a lot. It was a house,
That's been
and they
raised.
offered us a house, but now they have
They've
flattened
raised
the
the-
house, and it's just a lot.
right.
And what do they want for it? Is it price?
I'm trying to think where the current, yeah.
The village originally wanted 800,000 for it. I believe the latest offer now is down to 500, somewhere between 500,000 and 600,000.
Ellen, I did. She told me.
And is it something we would consider building on, or something that we would consider using just as land?
We actually brought the architect there. There's really not much we can build on it. The best purpose, in his estimation, would just be a parking lot.
But I guess across the street, that opens up all types of possibilities for us. Whether it's art space, music space. I mean, I'm not sure how much we can do into it, but it seems like it's all kinds of things we can do with that space. So at the very least, I would think it's worth maybe open up a line of communication with the district, if somebody could at least contact them and just see what the idea is on the space, how much it is.
Well, I think one of the uses and that has been commented on by a lot of people because of this lottery for pre-K is exactly that. And I've seen a lot of discussions out there in the community. Well, how come we're just doing this now? How come we don't have pre-K? And the answer is very simple. We don't have space for it. And, that is certainly a great place for the, what just happened? That would certainly be something to consider as a good use of space going forward.
So again, if we can get a consensus from the board to at least, I think, Dr. Lynch, that initially from us, that goes to you until you throw the ball downhill, at least maybe make some communication with the agent for that property and just get a sense of what they're asking for it, what the build height might be, and so forth. So at least we have a better sense of the actual square footage, the layout, and what they're asking is now. And then we can consider if it's something we want to present to the community. I believe, Dr. Bear, correct, if that was something we wanted to do, we would have to get community approval for that?
Yeah, there would be a referendum for the community to vote on.
Thank you, Dr. Bear.
In addition to, you know, checking with the agent for the property, is there a way for our architect to also maybe give us just an idea of if it's even usable property or what it would cost to turn it into usable property on top of the actual purchase price?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I'm with my kids a lot when they're playing at facilities, you know, playing sports facilities out on the island. And some of these facilities out on the island have more land in one plot than we have in all our fields combined. So I don't want to spend the taxpayer money irresponsibly, especially if we can't get much use out of these plots of land. But I think it would be a giant mistake not to investigate every single piece of property to see if we can acquire it and get some use out of it. We have to look into it. We have to have an idea of what we want it for, you know, prior to spending money. And, you know, to not go forth with, and do our due diligence would not be, you know, a solid goal.
All right. So, Dr. Berg, I guess we'll move forward and look into gathering our information about. I think the property next to us is now owned by the village. Is that correct?
Yes.
So we'll get a sense from the village on that, and let's get some more information from the commercial property across the street.
Sure.
And moving on to your superintendent's report, Dr. Burek.
Sure, and just have a short opening update. We're very pleased to welcome all the students back next week for the new school year. Just so everyone knows, we will be paying particular attention to the transition of our students to in-person learning every day and supporting those families who were full remote last year. There are quite a few, and it's very important to us to make sure all of those students have a safe reentry. Our staff is focused on rebuilding relationships and creating a warm learning environment where all those students feel like a part of the Lynbrook family. In fact, spoiler alert, and I gave the board a folder tonight, each student next week will receive a folder that states, "I belong in Lynbrook." It's a top priority for all to feel connected to our school as we do our best to re-enter into a more normal learning environment while still operating in this COVID world. This year I'll be sending out monthly bulletins, with the first one coming out next week for the month of September. The bulletins will contain information that's pertinent and beneficial for families district-wide. Your building principals are still the best source for the local activities and procedures, so you'll be receiving communication from them. We're looking forward to a great year that allows the students to get back into academics, sports, music, and other extracurricular activities that allow them to be well-rounded. So I just ask that we continue to work together to make it the best return for all. Speaking of return, today the teachers returned. We had our first of 2 superintendent conference days. Our staff, and it is raining out. Yes. The staff participated in their opening faculty meeting, their mandated annual trainings, and their department meetings. Tomorrow they'll be engaging in various workshops. One of the workshops is actually leveraging the laptops to maximize your instructional time. We're going to have conversations about culturally responsive education, and once again, keeping in line with our theme about making all students feel like they belong. And then another area is conversations, facilitating conversations. So if anyone, has been watching the news or just hearing things that are going on in society, unfortunately during COVID, people's emotions have gotten the better of them during this whole COVID shutdown, and there has been a breakdown in civility and how to be respectful toward one another. So what we're just trying to do is to help build capacity, give our staff a little more strategy skills in handling difficult conversations so that we can de-escalate tense situations. So we'll be participating in that tomorrow as well. The 9/11 remembrance. So this September 11th is the 20th anniversary of the tragedy on 9/11. I don't have to remind people. If you remember that day, and I'm sure everybody remembers that day quite vividly, it was a time of great tragedy, but it was a time also that brought together people. So just think about what I just said about creating that civility. It was a time when people were kind to each other, where people cared about each other. So we take pride in the fact that Lynbrook, the Lynbrook School District, is a community, and we want to use that strength in our schools and our community. On 9/11, there happens to be a scheduled football game. Our SGA is actually selling shirts that Lynbrook we will never forget, and we're inviting people, if they purchase those shirts, to wear those shirts, come out to the game, and really be there to support each other on this 20th anniversary. We're going to have a halftime ceremony to remember those who fell during that day, and we just want to make it a special event out of respect for all of those who suffered as a result of 9/11. I'm sorry, I just have to pause after that. Next item is the Board of Education goals. So the Board of Education, the goals are now posted on the district website. The board at its retreat discussed what we should be focusing on for goals for the upcoming year. As you know, we've received a great deal of federal funding to support our instructional programs, so monitoring that and making sure that we have utilized the money appropriately, that is one of our goals, and particularly the reading program. We have focused some of the money, a great deal of the money actually, on taking a look at our reading program, and we're targeting supporting the students in need and trying to build a well-rounded program, and we've changed, and Dr. Belekas have shared this last year during the board meetings. Our kindergarten teachers, we're starting at that level. They've been undergoing intensive training. They were trained over the summer. We're going to continue to have training to support our reading program for the students. So that's one of the goals. As I just mentioned, another goal was this transition to return to full in-person learning, to make sure that we have enough support mechanisms in to make sure that all of our students fulfill the graduation requirements. And then the last goal is continued professional development. There are a number of areas. I just mentioned the reading. SEL is another one, special education. So we're really playing a focus on the professional development of our staff. We truly believe that an investment in them is an investment in your students and your children. So those are the goals. Next item is the 5 Freer Street. As you know, the Cornerstone was a new property development. It was 5 Freer Street. It was the old Capri Hotel. So when it was a commercial property, we did not worry about if people were living there and where they would go. Now that we have multiple units in that, we do need to discuss, we did discuss where those students should go. So as those units are being sold, right now it is zoned for either choice of Marion Street or West End. We know that Marion Street is pretty much at capacity with the building it is right now, so it behooves us to, before anybody even moves in there so that no one's affected, to be proactive and select the zone for the students who will potentially live in that. So I put out that we recognize that West End would be the school of choice for that attendance zone. Okay. Mm-hmm.
The blocks to the, to the east, that are east of that property, but before Peninsula Boulevard. You know,
What's the area called? It has a name.
So you're west of Peninsula Boulevard, but you're before that property. What are they zoned for?
So that whole property is west of Peninsula Boulevard.
Right.
So they're a choice. They're a choice. So we don't want to disrupt we don't want to disrupt families that are living in those homes. Right. Or we have an opportunity right now when nobody is living there to designate the zone. We have studied the demographic studies. West End has the capacity to take on more, whereas Marion Street does not. So it behooves us to make this choice right now.
Right, so essentially, that property is going to be zoned similarly than those other blocks, except Marion Street is off the table.
Correct, because
aren't
the
blocks
surrounding
the
areas
home-
are a choice.
Okay.
But
So they
this
don't
now would
have a
just be
home-
West End.
They don't have a home building. The way that this is gonna have a home building, those other blocks do not have a home building.
They have a choice.
They get a
between
home
Marion Street
building
or
once
West End.
they choose
Okay,
it, that's
so
the
then-
home.
So then Freer is going to just have choice as well?
No, 5 Free would be designated for West End.
And no choice, they can't go to Waverly?
Oh, Waverly is open enrollment. That's always the case. Anyone can attend Waverly.
Okay.
That's an
so
open
the
enrollment
only
school.
So the only difference is they can't attend Marion Street, because right now Marion Street is just
Correct,
no room at the end,
correct,
but you can go to.
correct, correct.
Okay.
Yes. So everybody's in agreement? So there is a resolution this evening for the board to adopt that before those units get sold. And the last item is the monthly capital projects update.
Welcome to the brand-new Lynbrook High School. I mean, you're sitting in a completely remodeled room. This is radically different from before COVID. So just take a look at the new floor. I can't help but think of the late Alice Marie Bresnahan, there were a couple of cracks in this floor that upset her very much, and they are gone now. You can see these brand new windows that, if it were light out, would be looking onto a beautiful courtyard. So that's some of the real life happenings of this capital projects update. As Mr. Belmont indicated, we had a ribbon cutting today, and we took a tour of the new wing. The new wing is in good shape. I would say teachers are moving in today, and there's still some work to be done, but we'll be ready to receive students. There are work people in the science wing as we speak right now, so the science wing still needs some work, but the good news is that we did receive a certificate of occupancy today, so we are all set to welcome students back. There will be we're really hoping that all kids will be received into the science wing next week, and teaching and learning can begin, but we'll keep updating on that at this point. But there's definitely still some more work to be done, but the good news is they have all Friday, the whole weekend, and Rosh Hashanah weekend to get some stuff done. So we're really hoping we'll be in pretty good shape. Similarly, over at Marion Street, the inside is ready to receive kids. So there were some classrooms that had to be removed in order to accommodate the new shaft for the elevator. There was waxing going on those floors today. So we are ready to receive kids in those classrooms. The elevator itself, that work will continue. So that is not quite ready yet. That will be taking a lot of time. There's actually a whole removal of an oil tank that has to take place there. So there's a major excavation that has to happen, and has to be done very carefully and thoughtfully so as not to do damage to a 100-year-old building. So that is just something we're proceeding with extremely carefully. So there is a hole there that is well fenced off. Kids will not be, there will be some changes as to where Mrs. Macchia has that all worked out as to where kids will be gathering, but that work will continue. And then in addition, the chairlift that is connecting into the nurse's office from the old custodial office is not functional because it's not operational yet, but that will be safely able to receive students. So those are kind of the two major projects that we've been watching. The other project is the boiler in our building. We had replaced some brickwork and some flower gardens, so we really were unable to park in our spots for the last month or so. We were back in our spots today. The boiler work will be continuing, and we hope that by the time heating season comes up, that will be all ready to go. So that's kind of all of the old projects. And then, as I say to Mr. Seda every year, no sooner do we finish them than we start to look at them already. Plans for the courts at Waverly Park are going to start to be designed, as well as the turf field at North. So we're forever doing it. There'll be some discussions at the Facilities Committee, and we'll proceed there. So that's the general update.
And I said this last month, just to reiterate, we're the victims of the supply chain. Just like everyone else is. So you know, when we welcome the students, not every piece of furniture that we have ordered has arrived, so the rooms will not be completely fully outfitted, but they will in due turn. It was just, you know, it was just part of the process, but we're just very pleased that we have this addition completed. And that's my report.
Thank you, Dr. Burek. Anything else from the board?
I have a follow-up question about the Freer Street property. If you go to West End, how do you get to West End? Would the children in that property, are they self-transporting to school, or are they getting bused to school? How would that work?
I have to check the mileage. If it's greater than a mile, they would get bused. If it's less than a mile, they don't get bused.
Okay. In the event that they don't get bused, what do we have?
But remember, it's a choice right now. So they
Okay.
could be going to West End right now, and they're making that choice to do that.
Right, but I'm thinking about the safety of those kids crossing Sunrise Highway, crossing Merrick Road. I mean, have we got
Aren't they
the
doing
crossing
that
guard
now?
coverage there to get, if those kids are gonna have to make that walk, are we gonna get crossing guards to get them safely across Sunrise Highway?
We can request them.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing nothing else from the board, we'll move to public comment. If anyone would like to address the Board of Education, please come to the microphone, identify yourself, and indicate if you live in or out of district.
My name is Richard Winter. I live at 71 Union Avenue, right next to the high school here. I'd like to address the fact that the fence that was removed in early May also removed about 120 feet of wisteria that was growing on my property and in the schoolyard, and it removed all the privacy between our properties. Since then, I've had several conversations with Jim, the faculty superintendent, and they have agreed to replace the sprinkler system and some trees, and what I'm really looking for is not to do that, because now that they put the curbstone in, there's a lot less soil that I can plant in. So I'm really looking to get some sort of privacy put up between our property and the schoolyard. So I'd like to consider that. It probably would be cheaper than what he's proposed with the sprinkler system and the trees to do that.
So I'm just, he indicated to you he's putting in a sprinkler system, which is on your property or the school's property?
Well, when they took the fence out, it took the wisteria with it, and the wisteria had been growing there for like 70 years. So it pulled out my whole sprinkler system that was on that side of the fence, a number of trees and other plants and bushes. And the old fence was completely covered with wisteria. I don't know if you remember what it looked like. But there was like privacy between our properties. Now there is nothing. It's wide open.
And so Mr. Seda had spoken to you about some sort of replacement, and you're requesting that not be done in exchange for that, some sort of...
If you put some sort of cover on the lower part of the fence, I'm not even looking for the whole fence to be done. About 6 foot high, even for a portion of it.
How tall is the fence
The
currently?
fence there is about 12 foot, I believe. So maybe the halfway point is 6 foot. I don't, I'm just eyeballing it. I didn't actually go out and measure it.
Okay. Could we at least provide that information to Mr. Seda as far as what he's looking at and just continue the conversations?
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Gina Lee. I am in the school district. I have 2 children. One is entering kindergarten and one is entering 2nd grade at Marion Street. I'm also on the PTA at Marion Street, 5th VP. And I first obviously want to say thank you guys. I know it's been a crazy year. You guys have obviously given to our children throughout the year, and we are grateful for that. But I do think there's a concern over what went on at the June meeting versus what went on at the August meeting. I think we have a concern about the continuing mask mandates and our school district not fighting back against them, not fighting back against the governor's office and the state that are handing down these mandates. At the Lynbrook School Board meeting in June, this board specifically said, as well as put up on a slide, that if you, the Board of Ed, are allowed, you will be, quote unquote, making the mask wearing optional for the 21-22 school year. Yet when you were allowed to make that decision in August, you opted not to. At the August 11th board meeting, I was away, but the board meeting went on, and you went exactly against what you said you were going to do 2 months earlier, and opted to again require masks for all indoor learning and activities, and this was before the mask mandate was handed down by the state. I understand that COVID is ever-changing. The virus, the data, the science, it continues to change weekly, if not daily. But my concern is that when will it end, and will our kids be wearing masks forever? Is this the new normal? And I truly hope not. Many people say that the mask mandates are going to end when children have the ability to be vaccinated, which that'll be another mandate that I will come up and ask the school board to fight. But how can we trust that that is true? Because what we know now is that you can still get COVID while vaccinated, and you could still pass it on while vaccinated to vaccinated and unvaccinated people. Both my parents are vaccinated and currently recovering from COVID. Obviously, I'm not a doctor. I pulled some of these stats off of the CDC website as well as the American Academy of Pediatrics, and I have all the links I could send to the board. But per the research study that was published 6 days ago from the Center of Israel, which is a country that is over 75% vaccinated with 680,000 people, they determined that individuals who had immunity from vaccination only, so not people who are like myself, who have a vaccine plus post-COVID recovery immunity, but vaccination only, were actually 13 times more likely for a breakout infection and 27 times more likely for symptomatic disease and hospitalization. So we now know that the vaccine, while it may lower your chances of death, you still can get COVID and you still could pass it along. So does this mean that we're going to be in masks forever and our children are going to be in masks forever? At what point do we stop letting the fear of COVID get ahead of the data, especially when it comes to children? This data, as of 8/26 of the American Academy of Pediatrics, it shows that after months of the Delta variant, which is included through this August data, 0.1 to 1.9% of all children will end up hospitalized because of COVID, and 0% to 0.03 will end up resulting in death. So while these numbers are up very slightly versus recent weeks, but they're still below the corresponding percentage for most of last year, and the worst stretch of coronavirus infections for children to date are still the 13-week stretch from early November to February. So if the hospitalizations and the deaths have pretty much stayed the same, and since your statement in June, what made you change your minds in August? The percentages did not go through the roof from June to August. What made you change your mind even before the state mandated it? And I obviously want to be clear that I'm not downplaying COVID. I was in the hospital with COVID for 10 days. I would die if anything happened to my kids or any of these kids in this community. But at some point, we need to look at the hospitalization rates and death rates that have pretty much stayed the same throughout this pandemic. And I think at this point, seeing that even with the Delta variant and other variants that may come through, we have to go off of these hospitalization rates and the death rates, which are obviously the scariest part of COVID for these kids. And at what point do we give the choices back to the family and the kids? Even if it's not the choice of having masks optional, maybe there's some sort of middle ground, which some of the other school districts have proposed, which is wearing masks in hallways, buses, and common areas, but masks optional while sitting at their desks. We know enough now that I feel like the percentages are remaining low enough to give the choice back to the parents or even offer a little flexibility. Since August 25th, 385 children have died of COVID. Any death of a child is beyond my comprehension, and I couldn't imagine being those parents, and it's devastating. But we also need to remember that 500 kids every year will die from RSV, 180 from the flu, and 1,000 under the age of 15 will die in car crashes. But we've accepted those unpleasant realities, and we have never asked children to wear masks before for an RSV outbreak. We've never asked them to wear a mask before for flu outbreaks, and we've never asked them not to get back into a car. So at this point in the pandemic, I feel like we need to realize that the possibility that COVID really isn't going away. We're still passing it while we're vaccinated. People are still getting sick through this pandemic. Even with the Delta variant, though, children hospitalizations still remain extremely low, and death remains even lower. We know that there was a study in May from the Journal of Global Health, it was volume 11, that said that coronavirus transmission rates in school are roughly equal to or less than those of the surrounding community. In other words, educational settings are not inherently dangerous for younger children, more so than anything else our children are doing right now. Not one person, including myself, would ever want any child to get sick, but there are many of us that want the option now to have our children to either wear masks or at least remove them while they're sitting at their desk. It is a long time to sit at these desks. I mean, I've been here only 40 minutes. I'm sweating. It's uncomfortable. I have not worn a mask as long as my children have, and I don't honestly know how they're doing it. We want the option to weigh out as a family the risk versus the benefits for our individual children. So now is the time, I feel like, to give the parents back that option. If you want to have your children wear a mask, they could. But if you have the option and you feel like the risk outweighs the benefits there, we want to have the option to have our children not wear the masks. It's also the time that we need the school board to stand up for our students and push back on the state the way the Locust Valley School Board is doing. They're having lawyers look into this mandate and see if legally they can do that. The East Islip School District, which I have the letter, wrote a letter to the governor asking the governor to loosen the restrictions as they hit certain levels, to bring the community back together since it is causing such a divide, and eventually allowing masks as optional as they hit a 1% positivity rate. I have copies if you want to see the letter, I guess, that was being submitted, either was submitted or is being submitted. And we're asking our board to do the same thing. We're asking the board to do what you guys said you were going to do in June, and to stand up for our kids and push back the way you said you would in June when you had the option. I know the option is not there right now, but to still push back, to show that we are wanting masks optional, to show that we want some sort of leeway, to show that maybe the kids can take their masks down while they're seated at their desk. Because when you, in June, at the June meeting, you specifically said you want to have masks optionals. So with that, I don't know where you changed, and I don't know why, seeing that the percentages, I know there's this Delta variant, it's all over the news, but if you look on the data as of 8/26, those percentages have very slightly, if anything, especially when it comes to the deaths, have changed since June. So your stance shouldn't have changed since June.
So let me address some of that for you. Let me unravel some of it for you. So yes, to what was said in June. A couple of things that are inaccurate in that. This board works as a board. So as we've been telling the community straight through prior to June and so forth too, it's not so much a question of mask or not mask. What we want is to make those decisions ourselves. As you heard from Locust Valley, Master Peak, we have never wavered from that. In fact, the reason why there was very little discussion by us in August is because this board has never pandered itself, and we don't do things unless they have practical benefit. So we knew prior to the August meeting what the governor was going to do because we have that type of relationship with Albany. So for us to come out there and say we're not going to do it and get into the trouble that other districts do, we're not going to jeopardize our board, our money, or our superintendent by doing those things. And if you watch what happened in Locust Valley, that doesn't happen here. So let's go and be very specific what you're saying. We have made it very clear to Albany, directly to Albany and to the New York State Department of Health, that we would like to make those decisions ourselves. It's not relevant to get into a debate whether we should or shouldn't have masks because you can have a debate all day long about that. What we want to do is have the ability to do that ourselves, which is consistent with what we told you in June. We have never stopped from that. We have a meeting once a month with other presidents of other board presidents on Long Island where we meet to discuss these actual issues. And listen, one district may want masks, one may not. I'm not sure what the issue would be, but I want to be very clear about your comments about us changing our minds. We were not going to do something 4 weeks ago when we already knew, because of all the work we're doing with Albany, with the state, we knew that mandate was coming down. So to go there and make a statement there, to throw off our staff and superintendent and mislead our community to think we were going to do something which we knew we couldn't, it wasn't going to work. Now, a lot of your stats are accurate. A lot of stuff makes sense. I can't argue with a lot of those things. I took my daughter to an orthopedist's office today, and I had to wear a mask. I went home and I went to a gym, and I didn't have to wear a mask. So we have concerns about a variety of things: masks, vaccination, spacing, and so forth. But the most important thing is the arguments that you're making are the same ones we make on both sides of the coin. It's not relevant whether or not it should or shouldn't be a mask. We want to make that decision in conjunction with our community. But the most important point is we have talked to our legislators about it on both the county level and the state level and directly to the governor's office. The governor's office knows exactly Lynbrook's stance. Okay. And to confirm what you were saying about Locust Valley went there. They wanted to do a song and dance. I have a lot of respect for what they're doing. Yeah. And they said, we're not going to do it. And then the superintendent turned around and said, guys, you can't do it. The attorney told them you can't do that. So if the directive comes down, the place to have that traction to make that decision is what we've been trying to do, and what the other districts are trying to do is say, hey, let us as a community make those decisions. But as soon as they come out and say that, we're not the decision makers. And I said this the same analogy previously.
Can I just
Sure.
interject here?
Mm-hmm.
You're speaking some of this on behalf of yourself, the difference of what happened between June and August is clear. It was the Delta variant. Nobody wants to wear a mask. I don't want to wear a mask. None of us want our kids and our staff to have to wear a mask. But we were following the directives of the American Academy of Pediatrics, which, you had quoted their statistics.
But if those statistics haven't
of the
changed,
CDC.
that's, I guess, where the issue is if it was 0.03, 0 to 0.03 deaths in June and 0 to 0.03 deaths in August. So that's, I guess, where we just are, the frustration is coming in that it didn't seem, I'm glad to hear, I'm actually very happy to hear that you have been fighting back and that you have, made your stance clear with the governor's office, because it didn't feel that way. It
No,
felt
but
like.
let me just backtrack for a second. We made our stance clear last month when we decided that there was going to be a mask mandate before we heard from the state. So it's a matter of, it's our obligation to do what's in the best interest of the students and the staff and the community. And we're following the guidance of experts that are saying that.
But I disagree there.
And in addition, I just want to jump in for a minute. We also, at that point, knew the quarantine rules. So before we knew for sure, we heard what we thought the governor was going to do,
Yeah.
but we also knew the quarantine rules. And our job as a Board of Education is to educate all students. If everyone's quarantined and not in school, they're not being educated, and we know how remote
And that
works.
I know
So
what
wearing a
wrong.
mask in school, you're in school having contact with the teachers.
But at
is-
some point, I guess
Well, no one wants to be masked forever. No
if
one
the numbers
does.
aren't changing, you could say the Delta variant could be all over the news. It could be, and that is fine. But American Academy of Pediatrics numbers are what they are. I pulled this off of 8/26. It's 6 days
Ms. Lee,
later.
No one's saying that this is going to be.
But if the
forever.
numbers have, what I'm trying to say is if the numbers haven't changed, then your stance in August shouldn't
Missy,
have
I'm
changed.
going to say this from being a long, drawn-out thing. I have different views on whether we should or shouldn't wear the mask and when we should or shouldn't wear the mask. They told us if we're vaccinated, we don't need to do certain things. But to me, as we say in the legal profession, it's kind of moot until we have that option. So if we had that option right now, we'd probably have some heated debates amongst these board members on
Yeah.
what the policy should be. But the truth is, we knew the mask mandate was coming down. Mrs. Marcus said she didn't know I knew that the mask mandate would be mandated. There was no point in putting up an argument and a debate at that point. The time to come up and see some fireworks will be if the state comes down and says, or Massapequa's litigation somehow decides that the state can't mandate us certain things from the executive branch to the other departments, then of course that's going to be a very interesting board meeting, and maybe we'll make it to YouTube. And at that point, when we have the option to change
Yeah.
the manner in which it is, but right now we don't have that choice. So
I guess I just would hope that knowing what was said in June and knowing that if the numbers continue to stay the way they are, even though the state is handing that down, that you continue as a board to continue to push back and let them know that Lynbrook is not for this, that Lynbrook wants to have mask optional as
Well,
we
let's
said in
not
June.
get mixed work, because Mrs. Marcus is pointing on an issue. It's not Mrs. Marcus is made it clear, and as Mrs. Dino, about masks. My position, I'm not going to speak about it because it's not a relevant point now. I just want us to make the choice. I want us to have that debate and decide for this community as your elected officials what it should be. But we don't have that option now. So all the things you're asking for are great, and it would be a compelling argument to make. Should we get the opportunity to do that? Should the Department of Health or the governor's office say, hey, you know what, school districts, you're right. We're finally not going to tell you what to do in this particular area. And there are certain areas where they dictate that and then give us a choice. But clarify if you have different
You
positions.
have indicated, which is 100% true, this is ever changing. And what was 4 months ago wasn't the same as a month ago, which might not be the same in 2 months. So we don't know what will be. This is not going to be forever. We need to just see what happens and see what can be done. But in this moment in time, this is the way that we can keep most kids in school for in-person learning, which is the point of a school district.
Well, because the state is handing it down. If the state was not handing that down, then I would be up here.
Well, let's
You
save
know,
that
that'd be a
fight.
different
Let's save
thing.
that fight for another day when it becomes
Exactly.
a relevant fight. But I will tell you the point Mrs. Dino made, and I have a lot of different points on this issue and it's no point in getting into it. But the one thing that is a compelling argument is the fact that by wearing, the strongest argument that makes sense to me, we have the opinion, is if you're wearing a mask and the kid next to you has it, you don't have to go home. And that to me was a very, very strong argument.
But that's why that the East Islip with their
Remember, it's just a
proposing to
positive
me.
test. It doesn't have to be symptoms. If the kid
I
has it, we
understand that,
lost a lot of
but-
kids from school from that situation, so.
But at the same time, we're wearing masks in school, and then really those masks, for the most part, these kids are all summer have not been wearing masks at camp, at sports, and everything else. It's not like they're wearing masks correctly and wearing them the 20 hours, 18 hours a day that they are outside. There's still the ability to pass it, and there's still the ability to pass it even if you are vaccinated. My parents were vaccinated and got it from someone else who was vaccinated, but I guess the way even East Islip, what they're proposing to the governor, it's not saying you're not going to wear masks fully optional, but maybe it's just in the common areas, and maybe the desks are still 3 feet apart, right now? Are we back to full normal spacing, or is it 6 feet or 3 feet for the desks this year?
It's where possible, 3 feet.
Okay, so while kids are at their desks, they're proposing that kids can take their masks down at desks, but wear them in common areas, buses, halls, and any other common areas throughout the school. That is something that people I think would actually be amenable to as well, but it's that at least proposing that to the governor, at least showing the governor that we're not just okay with it. We would like some sort of option as a school district or as families to have some sort of leeway here. So that's all I ask.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Allison Kelly, and I'm a resident of the Lynbrook School District. I am also a first grade teacher in the Syosset School District. Last year was a challenge for all of us, educators, parents, administrators, and most importantly, our children. It felt like the year was never going to end, but I have to say we all got through it together, and I'm sure everyone celebrated when summer vacation began. I'm here tonight to tell my son's story. I have 3 children, 2 of whom are in the school district. My daughter is entering 6th grade at South, and my son is entering 4th grade at Marion Street, and my youngest daughter is 4 years old. At the start of last year, we didn't know what to expect. We knew we had to proceed with caution and do everything we could to make sure our children and the staff were safe. We can all agree that we feared the unknown and probably put a little too much fear in our kids. Both my daughter and son went off to school each day wearing their masks, socially distancing from friends, sitting in rows behind plexiglass. Both kids came home every day and never complained. They seemed happy and well adjusted to their new norm. But I came to discover my son was not okay. He was always a happy, well-rounded boy who loved school and sports. Although he never complained, he was internally stressing and having anxiety about the school day. Although he never complained, he started slowly losing his hair. And although he never complained, he was falling behind academically. He went from receiving 0 services in 2nd grade to suddenly needing services in 3 different areas in 3rd grade. His teachers were concerned, and his science teacher, who only saw him once a week, even called me to tell me she's seen a change in him from the previous year. My son began getting stomach aches every Sunday night, worrying about the week ahead, and it had nothing to do with his amazing teachers, who he absolutely adored seeing every day. I am here tonight to ask that you please consider what is happening to our children socially, emotionally, and academically. I know the state just mandated masks, but I'm here to ask you consider other options to help our kids stay safe. The plexiglass on students' desks allows them to sit safely behind them. Why can't our kids use them when learning and when they get up to use the bathroom, walk through the halls, go to common areas, put the mask on? There are so many other ways to keep our children and staff safe in schools. Masks should not be the only option. Of course, I support anyone who wants to wear a mask, but I also support choice, and I hope you will think of my son and the other kids that struggled last year moving forward. My son had an amazing summer being around all his friends, going to camp, playing lacrosse, baseball, football, and just being a normal kid again. I can guarantee almost every child had the same summer, and they all managed to stay safe. We all came out tonight to fight for our kids because we believe that masks are doing more harm than good. We can't let our kids down, and we can't accept that this is the way all kids will succeed this year, because if you have kids or you work in a school with them, you know that all kids learn differently. You don't need to be a teacher to know that differentiation works best in a classroom. No child should be left behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly.
Good evening. My name is Chris D'Ambrosio. I'm a resident. Dr. Bjork earlier was talking about Superintendent's Conference Day, and one of the classes, I was wondering if you could repeat the name of it. It was something with cultural that the teachers were taking.
Responsive education?
Yes, so could you let us know what that's about?
Well, we have students with different demographics.
Okay.
So it's trying to put ourselves in the other students' shoes so that when we're doing assignments or just having class conversations or whatever, just to be sensitive to perhaps the backgrounds that students are bringing into the classroom.
Is that something that's being taught within? You have somebody coming outside of district to provide that workshop?
There's actually a retired assistant superintendent for curriculum who's presenting that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
My name is Steve Moylan. I'm a resident of the district. Just wanted to ask a couple questions. I know it's already been covered about the mask business, but is there any metric that the board has as far as when the masks come off, or even in this room of just adults, where I think it's safe to assume that the overwhelming majority have been vaccinated? To the extent anyone is not, it is widely available. And yet, for some reason, you mentioned earlier that you don't have to wear it in the gym, but yet it's required that we all wear it here. Now, is there any reason why we're at a greater danger to get it here than you at the gym?
So listen, I agree with the argument. I'm happy to have you meet with the governor, explain that to her.
Okay. I just want to say one thing, too. It seems like a total cop-out that, oh, this is what the direction from the state. It seems easier to say that this is what the state mandated down, so that you don't have to stand in front of us and say, this is the decision that we made. And Mrs. Marcus, to your point about listening to the experts, Howard Zucker is still the Department of Health Commissioner for the state of New York. He's the same person that mandated nursing homes take COVID-positive patients, which led to the needless deaths of thousands. So these are the people that you're listening to. So before we say that we're going to listen to the experts, let's just take a minute to recognize who the experts are. Thank you very much.
Just to clarify, it was the American Academy of Pediatrics and the CDC. I did not mention Dr. Zucker, but duly noted.
Seeing nothing else from the community, we're going to move on. Sure, sure.
My name is Ashley Miller. I'm a district resident. I have a student entering the kindergarten center in September. I'm also an in-person teacher. I work in District 75 in New York City. It's all special education. I worked in person last year and through our full-time summer program throughout the Delta variant. Having worked with Delta in person in a building is very different than watching kids outside at a camp. I have 4 different sites for my school. I ran one of them. Our other 3 sites were shut down because of Delta. We have random testing in New York City, which identified multiple positive cases throughout the buildings, and those were the buildings where people were not keeping their masks on. We had security, and we found out they weren't correcting people when they were coming into the buildings. They weren't doing the daily health screenings. People were coming into the building symptomatic, and then saying a few days later, oh, I tested positive, and then 9 other people tested positive. Delta is not the same situation as last year. My site was the only one for the entire summer out of my school that wasn't shut down because we were very strict on our mask wearing. If that doesn't hit close enough to home and real life experience with this, I don't know what else does. So thank you to the board for waiting for the actual advice and mandate from the state that we knew that was coming. And let's all take a minute, hold our breath, and wait and see what happens next before we get super upset about a mandate that for now will keep kids in school and keep our sites open. That's the most important thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies, if you would, the meeting is to be addressed to the board. If not, let us continue with our business. Anything else? All right, moving on. We have one sympathy resolution this evening regarding Victor Miller. Whereas the members of the Board of Education of the Lynbrook Union Free School District have learned with sorrow of the recent passing of Victor Miller, former principal in the Lynbrook School District, and whereas Victor Miller served as an employee of the Lynbrook Public Schools for 25 years, from 1956 through 1981, retiring as principal of Waverly Park Elementary School, and whereas the Board of Education is mindful of the contributions made to our district by Victor Miller during his years of service to our community, be it resolved that the Board of Education records its sorrow, its sympathy, and the esteem in which Victor Miller was held, and being further resolved that a copy of this resolution be sent to the family of Victor Miller with the hope that they will find solace and comfort in the rich heritage of good works for which he is remembered and revered. Now, it's moments like this that I kind of miss not having Mrs. Bresnan here, so she'd be able to reminisce with me. Mr. Miller was my elementary school teacher, one I too often had to see in his office at that time, but probably helped shape me to the way I am, and it felt good to know that he lived to be 95 years old, so he had a good life, and that was always good to know. Moving on to the consent agenda, I'd like to ask for a consent agenda on resolutions 2109C1 through 2109C8, 210910 through 2109C12, 2109NC1 through 2109NC15, 2109G1 through 2109G8, and 2109G10 through 2109G21. May a motion, please? Mrs. Hanson, second. Mr. Murray, all in favor? Can I have a motion to accept the consent agenda? Mrs. Marcus, second. Mrs. Hanson, all in favor? Also like to have a motion to go into executive session to discuss the matters of personnel. Mrs. Dino, second. Mr. Yaker, all in favor? Thank you. Looking forward to the start of school. Everyone stay happy and healthy.